Welcome, Changelings. Tova here. Today I'm going to be doing the second part of my CardPlay kind of overview on the CardPlay process. CardPlay is a really great tool for self-exploration using a variety of different props like tarot cards, oracle cards, and really any type of card that has a lot of visual imagery, among other things, which I talked about in the first video. But before I get into that, I just wanted to say thank you to those of you who have purchased my whole health card deck. Again, it's available on Amazon and Etsy. There are links below. I'm not sure if my links actually work on YouTube, but you can always find my card deck or my app links to purchase or subscribe on my website, tovaabelmancoaching.com. And I also want to thank anyone who has subscribed or even just checked out my app, Whole Health Mindful Behavior. I've already done videos both on the card deck, which I actually use a lot in other videos. And then also I did a video on Whole Health Mindful Behavior. So again, thank you. And shout out to my one subscriber. I currently have one subscriber. It's not my parents, so that's pretty exciting. But if you are enjoying my content, please go ahead and subscribe. So with that out of the way, let's jump into talking about CardPlay. All right, welcome back to the second part of my little kind of orientation and overview of my CardPlay process. This is the second part, so we're going to jump into where we left off at the first one, which is on working with images. So many of you may be familiar with using tarot cards and oracle cards, and one of the key elements of tarot and oracle is the image. And, I previously talked about different types of props in CardPlay because CardPlay is not a tarot system, it's not a divination system. So you can really use any type of deck that has evocative visual imagery. And so that really opens up tools other than just using tarot and oracle. Like I mentioned, there's Dixit cards, there are photos, if you have a digital file, you can find images online and keep them for your personal use to use in this process. So really this key idea is on working with images. And that really gets to art. And I talked about, all of that in the first video. So I'm not going to dive too much into that process. But when we're working with images in CardPlay, we're really looking at the deeper dynamic that's being portrayed rather than a literal interpretation. Now, a literal interpretation does have its place, and that's actually kind of called a resonance. It's one step of a resonance. So if we were going to do a resonance with this image, and I'll talk more about resonances and different ways of working with the cards in other, specific videos on practices. But just generally, a resonance, we could first start off by describing exactly what we see in this picture. There is a house in the background, it has a pointy roof, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a literal interpretation. There's a woman in front of a house. But when we're going deeper in CardPlay, this really isn't just an image of a woman in a house, right? I'm asking you to go beneath the surface of the image and look at deeper underlying dynamics. So if there are different figures in the image, you might look at power differentials, which figure looks like they have more power or less power in relation to the other entity in the image. Thinking symbolically and associating, right? So, what are your associations to a house, to a home, to this idea of, leaving the home? And paying attention to what the images evoke in you, your own reactions to the images, what emotions arise when you see a particular image, noticing the feelings that are being expressed. Like, how does this woman feel? Is she leaving home? Is she going to go back? Does she live by herself? What is this? Is she offering this to us? She's barefoot. What is going on here on a deeper level, and also considering how these images might reflect experiences that you have in your life. Again, like if we think of the idea of home and leaving home, or being out in nature. How are you relating to those ideas and concepts? So symbols, again, if you're familiar with tarot and oracle, are really important in those systems. They're also really important within card play. So what are symbols? So first of all, I want to talk a little bit about, these books. These are books that I have, a dictionary of symbols, a couple of dictionaries of symbols. You can also use probably like dream dictionaries to kind of get this sense of symbolic meanings and symbolic languaging that's used in images. But with that said, what matters the most is your interpretation and what a symbol means to you, right? So in card play, we're looking for the symbolic meaning in the images. And symbols represent complex ideas or concepts, right? So again, if we're going back to this image, this is not just an image of a woman in a house. There's some deeper symbolism, going on in the fact, again, the barefoot, the nature, all that kind of stuff. So if we step back a little bit, language actually is inherently symbolic, right? So words represent concepts that are not present or concepts that are abstract, right? Like if I like this is really just a string of letters here, and we, English, if we speak English, we could read that as teacup, but there's no teacup there. But that word stands in for that idea of a teacup. And so in a way, it is symbolizing teacup. Similarly, forgiveness, right? That is what this word spells in English. And you people who are watching this video, myself, we all might have different ideas of what forgiveness means to us and what that word elicits or brings up in us. So diving back to image cards, they represent abstract concepts through visual symbols, and that's why using imagery cards can be so powerful, is because sometimes we don't always have words to describe a certain experience or something internally, but the image can be like a precipitate, or it can bring something up in us, right? So, maybe your ex-partner or whoever might not explicitly be represented in an image, unless of course you're using photography or your own photographs. However, they and other people can be represented symbolically in various ways. For example, a particular card, a particular image might evoke the kind of relationship dynamic that the two of you had, right? Like, again, going back to thinking about power differentials within an image. So more on symbols, because this is a really important piece. There isn't one single definition for a given symbol, right? Like I talked about symbols dictionaries, but again, those are really just another kind of a prop. It's another way to kind of get you thinking about what are some common meanings attributed to symbols. How does that compare and contrast with the meaning that you are kind of floating around with? Because really, symbols can have different meanings for different people, or even for the same person at different times and in different contexts, right? So that's why, you could look at one image card today, and the meaning that it has for you, the associations that you have, what it brings up in you would be different than if you look at that same card, the next week or the next month or whatever. Again, there is no single definition for a given symbol. It's very fluid. And the props in card play, like the imagery cards, it really mirrors that free association process in improv, right? So again, I talked about improv in the first video, but typically in improv shows, the improvisers will get a prompt from the audience. Like one that we used in our last show was a word that has two meanings, like night or palm or something like that. And so you get that that prompt from the audience, and then the improvisers will kind of use it to generate ideas. They're free associating off of it. And so we're using that same process with these images. These images are like these prompts that we, or whoever is engaging in the card play process, are then kind of free associating off of. So symbols can be an object, like a ring or the sun or the moon or a potion or a door. Um, and the idea is really to kind of think about what the symbol elicits in you in the context of the current card play activity, right? This is very present moment focused, and the symbols and the images are acting as like a precipitate for your inner experience. It's kind of making things that you might not be fully aware of very conscious in that moment. And then I just want to touch on a symbol versus a sign. So a sign might be something like a brand logo. Um, and again, that brand logo, so, we might see like the golden arches, and that, conveys for many of us McDonald's. Um, and so that's what the sign is. But that logo might have a personal meaning to you. So the ideas, the feelings, the thoughts, and the memories that seeing those golden arches evokes, that's more in the realm of symbol, right? So I might have a different association than you do to McDonald's or to any other symbol, or to any other like brand sign or brand logo that we see. So I want to talk a little bit about archetypes, because these are also really important in card play. So these are largely described by Carl Jung, who was a psychologist. And archetypes can transcend cultures, and they tend to reoccur, in art, literature, myth, and stories. These are things that I really find super fascinating, again, coming from a drama therapy background. And I like this quote on archetypes. This is by Daniel Lieberman from his really great book, Spellbound. And he thinks of archetypes as blueprints for big ideas. These ideas are fundamental to humanity and concern the most important aspects of human existence. So, archetypes can include characters like the mother, the hero, the wise one, and the trickster. They can be events, um, and these are fundamentally human events, right? Like every human being was born, every human being will die or experience, various kinds of endings. And most humans will cross some kind of a threshold and cross into, go through some kind of transformative life experience. It can also include concepts like lightness, darkness, and struggle. And archetypes often have a light side and a shadow side. And these are components of an image, just like symbols. So I want to dive a little bit deeper into associations and kind of how the process of association works. So I'm going to just show you the next slide, and then we'll move on from there. And just notice your experience when you see this slide. All right, so like I've been saying, images and words and card play evoke personal associations. So when you see this is really just letters. They're just design, but the way that they're arranged in English is a word and it's a place. And you might have certain memories or thoughts about this place that are evoked that are maybe different from mine or from somebody else. And that's the process of making associations. We have associations based on our life experience, and how we see things can reflect back to us who we are. Sometimes these associations that we have are helpful, and sometimes they are not helpful. And so being mindful of the associations that you have can help you break the spell of ones that don't serve you. And the same thing can be said for narrative. So I have a whole other process called Storycraft. I might do a video on that. I'm also, if you're interested in Storycraft, I'm putting together a group for that. It's all on my website. You can go check that out. But basically, some narratives that we have about ourselves or about life, etc., are really outdated and restrict our growth. and some narratives are empowering. So association to the prompts, to the images, to elements of the image, right? It might not even be the whole image. You might zero in on one part of the image. That's fine too. Those are all really important processes in CardPlay. So I also want to touch on this idea of randomness, right? So I have different ways of choosing cards in CardPlay that I'll talk about in other videos. But essentially, there's this idea of randomness in choosing cards. And one way that I offer you as a way to think about it is using this concept of synchronicity. And again, synchronicity comes from Carl Jung. It's a kind of spiritual idea that describes unrelated events that are meaningfully connected. So this, choosing a card is kind of random, but with synchronicity, we're kind of seeing that maybe it's not so random. Maybe this was the right card for you in this moment, right? So these cards that you're drawing seemingly randomly in CardPlay are not random at all. Again, like I said, the cards you draw at the time you draw them are the correct cards for you in that moment. So that's adding this element of meaning in what is otherwise a random process, or what seems to be a random process. So this is a totally optional way for you to relate to the process of drawing cards in CardPlay. You don't have to, and CardPlay is still effective. But if you want to, you can kind of start to play around or think about integrating that concept of synchronicity into how you derive meaning from the seemingly randomness of card selection and CardPlay. Kind of like rules in a game. You can think of CardPlay as like a game. And when we're in the CardPlay world, this is just kind of how things are. We're accepting that these are the right cards for me in this moment. It also kind of speaks to dramatic convention. So, as the audience, when we go see a play, for example, or improv, there are things that we kind of accept as true in that dramatic realm. Like there's a separation between the reality that's happening on stage and the reality of the audience, like the reality of the characters versus the reality of the audience. We kind of accept that fourth wall, right? So the characters on the stage don't often interact with the audience. Sometimes they do. That's called like breaking the fourth wall. Even though we know that they know that the audience is there, there's this convention of this like separation almost. So those are kind of the main concepts of CardPlay. I'm going to talk more about this in another video of this as a practice entirely. I actually already do have a CardPlay practice up. You can go check that out. And again, if you're familiar with tarot or oracle, this is probably a pretty well-known practice for you, but I'm going to talk about it maybe from a slightly different perspective in CardPlay. And again, I'm not going to go too into this right now. I'm going to do a separate video on it, but it's basically a weekly practice of choosing a card to represent a guide for your upcoming week. I'm going to leave it at that because I'm going to do an entire video just on that. If you're interested in more CardPlay with a group of like-minded people, I am in the process of putting together a CardPlay group. There are more details on this group on my website under the Work With Me section. If you scroll down, I have a list of links to pages for some of the groups that I'm putting together. So I have one that's just for CardPlay. You can check that out. And of course, you can get in touch with me, my email, my website. I'm on Instagram. I have a Facebook page. I'm on Twitter, my Etsy for where you can buy my whole health card deck. And then, of course, if you're here, you are familiar with my YouTube. So that's it. Thank you. And I'm excited to start sharing more specific practices on CardPlay.